Hello and welcome to the Pop Council Podcast, the show where we cover everything in pop culture. Each week on this show, we'll discuss topics in the geek world as well as various fandoms such as Disney, Marvel, DC, Star Wars, theme parks, and everything in between. I'm your co-host, Jami Philbrick, entertainment journalist and critic for We Live Entertainment and board member of the Hollywood Critics Association. Today, we have some great topics to talk about. We will be discussing the recently announced, as recent as this morning, Obi-Wan Kenobi casting news, as well as the new Suicide Squad trailer that dropped last week, DC casting news that happened last week with Black Adam, Shazam 2, The Flash, as well as Falcon and the Winter Soldier Episode 2 spoilers, and we'll do a little bit of a review of Amazon's new animated series, Invincible. Every week, I'm joined by my co-host, Wendy Lee Szany. Hey, Wendy, how you doing?
Hello, I am good. I got my matcha latte. I'm ready to go, ready to talk stuff.
All right, we got a good one today, and I am so happy to welcome our guest for this week. We've been trying to get him on the show since we started, and you know him, you love him, from Forbes.com, Scott Mendelson. Hey, Scott.
Woo-hoo-hoo. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I know our viewers are familiar with your work, I'm sure, but tell them a little bit about yourself and where they can find you.
I write for Forbes, Forbes.com. I am a general movie blogger, but I'm known best for my domestic and, when appropriate, international box office analysis. That's been a little challenging over the last year, but we're slowly getting back to life. I'm hoping I won't spend this summer writing about the $400,000 debuts of some random VOD movie no one's ever heard of.
Oh. I will tell you, Scott, that I have found your creativity with your articles during this time very fascinating and interesting. And I told you before personally, I don't read a lot of people's stuff. I don't even read the stuff I write that gets published, right? But I always read Scott Mendelson. So
that.
Except for that nasty paywall. That's the only thing. But other than that. Oh, I know. Well, let's dive right into it because, as I mentioned, we had some big casting news today. This morning, Disney announced the full cast of Obi-Wan Kenobi, the new series that'll be on Disney Plus. I'm going to take that graphic off because it's not working too well. Let's see. They announced this morning who the cast members are going to be, and I'll run it down right now. Of course, we knew that Ewan McGregor would be involved, and the rest of the cast includes Moses Ingram, Joel Edgerton, Bonnie Piess, Kumail Nanjiani, I'm very excited about, Indira Varma, we knew, Rupert Friend, O'Shea Jackson Jr., Ice Cube Jr., as I like to call him, Sung Kang, of course, Justice for Han from the Fast and Furious movies, is it Simon Kessel? Simon Kessel, I believe, and Benny Safdie, of course, the Safdie brothers, great directors. So, lots of very exciting news, and of course we know Hayden Christensen is coming back as well. I think the most interesting there is that the Lars Owen and his wife will be returning from Joel Edgerton to play Luke Skywalker's uncle. So let's start with our guest, Scott. I'll open it up to you. What do you think about this casting, these announcements? What surprised you? What impressed you? What do you like?
Well, I did not realize that Benny Safdie was an actor, so that's interesting. Obviously, I've seen his two mainstream pictures. Yeah, I mean, as far as the show, I'm sure it will be decent. I like Deborah Chow's work on The Mandalorian. I hope they make something that can mostly stand on its own without retreating into original trilogy nostalgia, however hard that will be with a project that, let's be honest, is rooted in a certain amount of generational nostalgia. I've complained about that elsewhere, so I won't be a broken record. As far as the cast, I'm excited to see who Hayden Christensen is going to play. I like that rom-com he did with Emma Roberts, Little Italy. So, high-profile gig. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's a show that's not to be too cynical about it, is basically based on the fandom of episode 3 memes that are all over Twitter and Facebook over the last few years. It's basically, oh, hello there, the series.
Right.
And, it's obvious that Disney is basically using Disney Plus to do the Star Wars stories that they decided not to do after Solo stumbled. But, Solo stumbled because it was a movie that nobody wanted to see, starring an actor nobody had heard of, as most people hadn't heard of, Beautiful Creatures Rocks, as Han Solo. And, those of us that were, waving the fire torches for 4 years saying, stop, this is a mistake. Oh, well, vindication stinks. But as far as, it's a Disney streaming service, so it's going to be in the same way that a lot of otherwise unremarkable, forgettable, or outright bad Netflix movies become social media sensations because everyone's lazy enough to sit on their couch and hit play. You are removing a certain amount of effort that, someone that might not have gone to a theater to see an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie set between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, yeah, they'll check it out 45 minutes at a time every Friday on their TV. And, without getting too big picture-y about it, I do think that's an issue in the streaming era where you are seeing a lot of doubling down and tripling down of the kind of IP for the sake of IP that, frankly, is how television caught up with movies in the first place.
Right.
When Hollywood was going tentpole crazy over the last 15 years or so, you had television that was coming up and streaming that was coming up from behind with original, or at least new to you, adaptations, high concepts, star-driven, adult skewing, stuff that could deal with issues of the day in a more micro way than movies could. For example, the Mortal Instruments TV show, Shadowhunters, could be a lot gayer than the movie was. But now what I fear is the streaming war has created an even bigger drive for stuff that gets media coverage just because you've heard of it. And because the metrics for tracking how many people watch this, do people enjoy this, do they watch the whole episode, do they want more, are so cryptic at best that, if streaming does become the norm, you're going to have a new normal where the only way to tell if something was successful is if A, we got another season or a sequel, or B, if it was trending on social media for more than an hour.
Right. That's interesting. I think you bring up some really good points, Scott, especially about nostalgia with the series. Wendy, let me take it to you and see what were your initial thoughts of this casting and what Scott said about sort of the nostalgia factor with this series.
For the casting, I am excited to have this entire cast revealed. I'm excited to see who they're going to play, what stories they're going to tell. I'm kind of already trying to guess if they're going to give us, based on the cast, and sort of if they're going to give us new characters or if they will bring back certain characters that we've already heard of or met, whether it's in like sort of either books and or past movies. We know with Hayden who he's coming back to play, but what about everybody else? So I'm kind of curious about that. My hope for this series is that we get to be introduced to more new characters, with different stories to tell and how they cross path with the one and only Obi-Wan Kenobi, to sort of talk about the nostalgia aspect of it. That is certainly the way they've hooked me, for the Obi-Wan show. Not that I didn't want one to begin with. I wanted one to begin with. I was wondering how they would do this. I do think that putting it on streaming is a better way to go than the movies. Though I will say, since Scott brought up Solo, I feel like had they gone with an Obi-Wan movie, I felt like it would have had more success in the box office than Solo. Just because for me personally, I didn't need a prequel, like an origin story for Han Solo. I like that a lot of his, the talks about Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon and the Kessel Run, that was shrouded in mystery. And that's what made him sort of this, legend. And I wanted that mystery. I didn't need how he got his name and how he got the dice and this and that. Like, I don't need any of that because we already you can kind of, and you can kind of get a little bit of a hint of it reading the books and things like that. So, but with Obi-Wan, we've seen so much of his story in all the movies that it would be nice to fill in the gap of what happened here.
Yeah,
so that's what I'm looking forward to.
I think you make a good point with Solo versus Kenobi, had they done that theatrically. I think with Kenobi, we all accept Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan, right? From the first movies. Obviously, he was reprising Alec Guinness's role, but we accept him as really our Obi-Wan in a lot of ways. And the difference is with young Han Solo, you have to cast a new actor. We have to believe in this first film, he's young Han Solo. And so I think that was part of the problem there. And maybe Kenobi would have done better as a film than Solo. And I completely agree with you. I mean, who cares about how he got his name Solo and the dice and some of the callbacks that they crammed into that movie, unnecessary. As far as the casting of this, I think it's sort of, my reaction is sort of like, any casting news, it's like, oh, that's a great actor. Okay, well, let's wait and see what role they're playing. I mean, I think we obviously know what role Joel and Bonnie are playing in addition to this new guy, Hayden Christensen. So that's not a surprise. But I do agree with you. I really hope that, some of these great actors, Rupert Friend, Dirna, some of these other actors that have just been cast are really good. I hope they're playing new characters that are maybe from Obi-Wan's past or from, that gap of time that we have in the Star Wars timeline of Obi-Wan's life between, bringing baby Luke to his aunt and uncle and then, being the hermit that the young Luke meets. I don't know if that's, my guess is that's the timeline that the show will take place in. Who knows? But I hope that we discover new characters from that timeline as opposed to, but also, it would be great to have like some book characters or like a video game character, some kind of random fan thing. And then just to address the nostalgia issue, I mean, I think like you're 100% right, Scott. Like, yeah, this is nostalgia. This is why we're excited about it. This is why these shows are doing well. I mean, you could even say Zack Snyder's Justice League was nostalgia to a certain degree. And that's sort of what is building anticipation, excitement for this stuff on streaming. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes and, who plays what and when we're going to hear some more news about this casting. But I think it was good to get it out today and kind of get the excitement going, right, with the fans now that they're starting to go into production on it, and things will start to leak, I'm sure, as they always do. Well, we don't want to spend too much time on the casting news because there was also obviously the trailer on over the weekend on Friday. The Suicide Squad trailer dropped. Got a chance to see a little bit more of where all these characters kind of fit in. Who are the new cast of characters, the returning characters? It was I enjoyed the trailer. I actually got to go to the set of Suicide Squad. I think it was the last set visit I did before the pandemic. And there, that shot in the middle of the trailer where they're on a rooftop and they're talking to the Thinker? That's the shot I saw them filming. So it was really kind of cool to see that in the trailer. And obviously, I think the big news from the trailer is the confirmation that Sylvester Stallone will be the voice of King Shark, as well as the confirmation of the long-standing rumor, which they didn't even talk about when I was on set, is that the big baddie, the villain, will be Starro. So let me take it to Scott again and see what you thought of the trailer and of the news of Stallone and Starro.
Well, first of all, I had not read anything about Starro possibly being in this film, so my reaction was the same. Holy crap! Is that Starro? Oh, neat. You're doing a reaction video, would be like, oh, neat. No, I think it's a solid trailer. I mean, we've been down that road before. I do appreciate, even as someone who did not like the first Suicide Squad, I appreciate this is a straight sequel and not a reboot or even a soft reboot, because it's the same characters. It's the same, Viola Davis is still there. Maybe she'll actually be good at her job this time.
So that's interesting. Let me just stop you there. You see this more as a straight sequel than a soft reboot, because I actually see it as kind of a weird hybrid of both.
Well, yes and no. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a sequel.
Right.
And yeah, they're just like in the proverbial old days, Batman Forever was a very different film from Batman Returns, but it was still a sequel to Batman Returns.
Right. Good point.
You're allowed to go in different places and play in different sandboxes. Even to a certain extent, the Fast and Furious movies tend to, okay, what genre can we play in this time? This one's a spy film. This one's a superhero picture. This one's a Mission Impossible type whatever. Anyway, it was very funny. It was very quippy. It was very droll. It reminded me in a good way of the Harley Quinn cartoon that's been airing on DC Universe / HBO Max. Gunn confirmed that was just a coincidence that King Shark looks exactly like he does on Harley Quinn, and that's fine. Sylvester Stallone voicing that character isn't going to make the version of Harley Quinn any less special. And it looks like a lot of fun. I am bemused that Warner Brothers basically gave James Gunn an over-under same budget to make an R-rated sequel to a PG-13 movie that not everyone liked that much. It was a commercial success, don't get me wrong. And I think most general audiences, they saw it once, they thought it was fine, whatever. Even though this sequel arguably doesn't have two of the biggest marketing hooks that the first one had. There's no cameos from the Joker or Batman, and more importantly, this is not a Will Smith star vehicle. Right? And especially overseas, there were a lot of people that otherwise wouldn't have cared about Suicide Squad that showed up because it was a Will Smith action comedy. So for this film, you're basically in a situation where, okay, the only card we have to play is it's a Suicide Squad movie. And again, the whole HBO Max theaters thing I'd be a lot more pessimistic about this picture if it was in a conventional time and it only had succeeded in theaters. But, because, there's a long history of sequels to Will Smith movies that don't include Will Smith that do. It's a subgenre.
You're so right.
And that's a big reason why Aladdin did better than I think most of us were expecting. Because to a lot of people it was, it's Will Smith as the genie making a subtle sequel to Hitch, no less, which is one of his more popular pictures, along with the whole Disney nostalgia, yada, yada, yada. Looks good, looks fun. And right now, I would argue that DC Films is on a roll. I wasn't huge on Wonder Woman 84, but at the very least, that film, its strengths and its flaws were absolutely Warner Brothers telling Patty Jenkins, go play, do whatever you want, just come back in before dark. Right. With all the talk about, filmmaker-driven films versus, studio mandated, brand mandated, yada, yada, yada. Wonder Woman 84 was very much a filmmaker-driven picture. Joker was good. Birds of Prey, excellent. Shazam was terrific. Aquaman was great. The first Wonder Woman was very good. I like both versions of Justice League. That's probably a conversation for later. I think they both work for very different reasons, perhaps. So in my opinion, they've been on a roll since Suicide Squad, dumped the bed. If we're allowed to be profane here.
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying. Absolutely. I think DC is on a roll. And it's interesting about the James Gunn thing, and then I'll toss it to you, Wendy, because, the studio desperately wanted David Ayer's Suicide Squad to be James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy. So I think it's really ironic now watching the trailer, seeing even the fact he used a Steely Dan song, you know what I mean, in the trailer. It's so James Gunn, which is kind of what the studio always wanted Suicide Squad to be anyway. So I thought that was interesting. And then the other interesting thing, and Wendy, maybe you want to talk about this a little bit, since you were mentioning Will Smith, and I do agree in many ways. I think Will Smith is the last of the movie stars, and that the way that we knew them in the 80s and 90s. But the casting of Idris Elba, and I will let you in on something. We were told on set he was playing Vigilante, which is a different DC hero, anti-hero, who's very similar to Deadshot, Deathstroke, and Bloodsport. They're all sort of in the same kind of realm. And so I don't know if we were being lied to in the production office when they told us that, or if maybe there was a change halfway through production, because the costume's the same. You could easily just change the character's name. So I think that's an interesting thing. But what did you think about the trailer and specifically Idris Elba's sort of debut as Bloodsport in this, Wendy?
I thought the trailer was a ton of fun. It just had every bit of personality that I expected from James Gunn. And it's kind of what I wanted the original Suicide Squad, not the original, but the David Ayer's Suicide Squad. That's what I wanted it to be really wacky, to be chaotic, to be fun. And what I got the most out of this trailer than I got from the previous film is that there was chemistry between all these characters. Even in the scene where they're just in the trailer, where they're just rescuing Harley and she comes out, she's like, oh, well, do you want me to go back in again? And that's just patronizing. And it's the pacing and the comedy that's in there that I'm living for. Like the beats are there. And I felt that I didn't really have that in the theatrical, in the other Suicide Squad. And then just to talk about Idris Elba, I am a fan. I'm such a fan. And I just think that he's going to be able to bring a good balance of comedy and seriousness when things get a little bit more toned down, get a little dire when the Suicide Squad members maybe get popped off. Because they always say, like, who's going to survive? It's like, oh, we don't know. But I think he is kind of going to help us anchor the movie. And that's kind of who I see. As far as movie star power, I mean, certainly to me, he is every bit of a movie star as Will Smith. However, I do know that internationally, when I talk to my parents about movies that are coming out, I say Will Smith, they catch the name just like they would catch like a Tom Cruise, talking about the traditional movie star, right? And if I drop Idris Elba, my dad's like, wait, who is that? And he's got to go look it up. And once he sees the face, he recognizes, but the name doesn't click quite yet. So I'm hoping that overseas, they'll still give this movie a chance, that they're not like, oh no, Will Smith will pass. Like, I hope it's not that, because I really, really want this movie to be successful everywhere.
Well, I kind of see the star power in this film being John Cena, right?
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
John
He's huge
Cena,
in China.
Huge all around the world because of the wrestling and all that stuff. And, he really is sort of poised in a way to be the next Rock if he can kind of get there. So I think that he's sort of the star power. Certainly Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn has a certain amount of cachet at this point. And then it's interesting, we'll have to see. From what I saw on set, it looked like Joel Kinnaman's Rick Flag was sort of being promoted in more of a lead way in the film, which I think is good. I don't know that he necessarily has the international star power to carry the movie, but maybe the acting strength in there. I agree with you, Scott, but maybe the acting strength in there, and certainly Harley and of course Viola Davis, but I would assume her role is going to be somewhat limited in the film. So I thought that was
the real star of the movie is going to be King Shark. That's it.
Yes. Well, and I think Starro, I think some of these visual effects. And you brought up something else, Wendy, that I'll throw to Scott. Obviously we know with this property, Suicide Squad, even the catchphrase, I think, is something like "not everyone is going to live" or whatever, something like that. So I thought that the poster kind of gives away who's going to live and who doesn't. Like, if you look at the poster and who are the main faces on the poster, it's not Captain Boomerang. It's not Nathan Fillion. It's not Michael Rooker. You know what I mean? You've got Polka Dot Man, Ratcatcher 2, King Shark, and then Joel, Idris, and Harley Quinn. And so I kind of think that that's the main Suicide Squad team, and that maybe Boomerang is leading a team that will not last long in the movie, that has Pete Davidson and Nathan Fillion and those guys on it. So did you sort of get that spoiler a little bit from looking at the poster, Scott?
No, only because I'm pretty much of the impression that there are so many people in this film that any one of them can be the Sam Jackson of Deep Blue Sea.
Another great reference.
I think that's very intentional, that he cast enough vaguely recognizable people that, there is a capacity to, I didn't think they were going to die because I've heard of them. And yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm guessing Margot Robbie is not going to die. And I'm guessing, and I could be wrong, that John Cena's get an HBO Max prequel series means he's probably not going to die. Because, despite what Marvel is trying with Black Widow, there is a certain, there's a prequel, but the character already died, so how much do I care? That's one of the things I like about this picture on the surface is that there are so many people in it. It doesn't make the Jurassic Park 3 mistake, where you've got like 5 victims and 2 of them are killed off immediately.
Right.
I very much enjoy that film, but you need a few more red shirts. This film's got tons of red shirts, and that's that's sort of the thing that they're advertising is that yes, a lot of these people will not be in the sequel. One thing I think it's funny, and you were Wendy, you were right about what they were hoping. I think Jami brought it up too. I think when they hired David Ayer in 2014ish, they thought, hey, Suicide Squad can be our Fast and Furious. And David Ayer wrote the first Fast and Furious back when that was a slightly more toned down, harder edged, street level crime. It was about stealing DVD players, for God's sakes. Then, of course, as time passed on, and by the time the film was going into production, especially after it was about to be edited, Guardians of the Galaxy had blown up. They're like, oh, well, maybe we'd rather have this. And we can always wonder, hindsight 2020, yada yada yada. But if it had been would have been at least better received by critics had it been closer to Fast and Furious as opposed to Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right.
But commercially, I mean, it did $745 million worldwide without China. That to me is best case scenario for a movie like that. So commercially, I cannot argue that they made the wrong decision. And critically, well, who cares? They don't care if critics like it or not, as long as it makes money. I have my, as someone who banned the likes of It, Force Awakens, and Beauty and the Beast, I have no illusions on my impact as a film critic. But I'm rambling, so I'm going to let somebody else take over.
Okay. Well, I think that's good, Scott. I think we kind of covered everything here with the Suicide Squad. And since we were talking Obi-Wan Kenobi casting, there was a bunch of big DC casting last week that we wanted to sort of mention. So, of course, Pierce Brosnan, I think this is really exciting, will play Dr. Fate in Black Adam. And I think that's some really cool casting there. Also, announcement that Helen Mirren will be joining Shazam! Fury of the Gods. I mean, you don't get a better actress than Helen Mirren, so that is so exciting. And now she's going to be in the DC universe and the Fast and the Furious universe, so that just makes my head explode. And then we had mentioned last week that, or maybe the week before, that Billy Crudup, unfortunately, due to scheduling, has to leave his role as Barry Allen's father in the upcoming Flash film. And another great actor who curiously looks a little bit like Billy Crudup has been announced for the role, which is Ron Livingston, who's an actor I've always enjoyed, and I think we all go back to Office Space, one of the great comedies of all time that he starred in. So some interesting casting news this week. And Wendy, why don't I throw it to you? What do we think about Ron Livingston, Pierce Brosnan, James Bond, and of course, Helen Mirren, the Queen herself, joining the DC universe?
How do you say no to Helen Mirren being in anything? First of all, I just love her. She is a treasure. I love seeing her, though, like after seeing her in Red, love that she's popping up in these action flicks. We saw her in Fast and Furious. Was it like 9? No. 8, 9,
8, and then
one of those.
She was in 8, and I believe she was in.
Yes, that's what it was. And I just love her because she can, be serious and dramatic, or she can have tons of fun with the material given to her. So I can't wait to see her in the Shazam film. I would say one of the casting that surprised me, not really so much the actor, but the characters, Dr. Fate.
Yes.
Like I was not expecting it at all. So when it dropped, I was like, oh, Dr. Fate. Okay. And I was like, wait, who's playing? And I don't think Pierce Brosnan he's been cast in any superhero movies. Well, I mean, You can count James Bond, I guess, in a way, as a superhero. You might as well. But so I'm excited to kind of see his his superhero film debut and see how he's going to play Dr. Fate. I'm very excited for this venture into a little bit of the magical world, the magical side of the DC universe. So I'm like so pumped for Shazam 2, and I'm so pumped for Black Adam. Like I've been waiting for Black Adam for a really long time. So everything is lining up for me. Like I'm for it. I just hope that, it's always great to have this cast, this person, whatever, they can act, what they can bring to the table, but it's how well these characters are going to serve the story. And if they're going to give these characters a nice arc and development, or if it's just going to be like, well, here's a name drop, like here's a character. That's what I don't want. Because it's like, what's the purpose of it then?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the Pierce Brosnan casting, I think, is so brilliant, but completely out of the box. Like, I never would have thought of that. And also, since you noticed that the Justice Society casting has skewed younger, so it doesn't shock me, looking back now, the idea that they would want one other sort of gravitas actor to kind of ground, somewhat named to ground the film. And I think that Brosnan is a perfect choice for that. But like I said, a little bit out of the box. Scott, what did you think?
Well, we're at a point right now where it's no longer remotely surprising for a comic book movie, especially a comic book movie, or a Disney franchise, Star Warsy, to have actors that 20, 30 years ago would be a surprise to see them. 20 some years ago, it was surprising to see Willem Dafoe in a Spider-Man movie. It would have been, 2017, you find out Cate Blanchett and Jeff Goldblum in Thor. Is like, where else are they going to go? And again, it's sort of a commercial reality. The internal and external destruction of the mid-budget studio programmer has left an entire class of prestigious but not insanely wealthy by Hollywood standards actors. If you want a studio paycheck, you're either going to go to streaming, you're going to go to TV, you're going to go be a supporting role in a superhero movie. It's not 1989 where Jack Nicholson asked for basically, ended up with $50 million because it was such a coup for him to be in Batman. And that's been a slow process. I mean, it was noteworthy, but not super noteworthy. That say, Chris Nolan's Batman Begins had Liam Neeson, Christian Bale, Cillian Murphy, Ken Watanabe, Morgan Freeman, Michael Caine. Michael Caine says yes to everything. That's true. So yes, on one hand, Pierce Brosnan, I didn't think of that. Neat. On the other hand, I have seen him play this kind of fantastical mentor role in the Percy Jackson pictures. Let's hope this is better than that. But it does show that DC is now playing a similar game as Marvel, which is, let's see how stacked we can make these movies. So at the very least, we're offering a little bit, character plus star as an added value element. Because by itself, star power is dead.
Right.
Marquee character star power is still a thing, but you get more for your money if you have someone people like Tom Hardy as Venom versus just some guy as Venom.
Right.
So in that case, the star power does matter. Now, just resources for Venom, they're not going to show up for the Drop or Child 44. And you were about to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, actually, I was going to quote you. I think I've read you say in the past that it really is now a combination of the star power and the character, right? Like, you're exactly right. Tom Hardy and Venom.
More of an emphasis on the character than it used to be. It's for example, in 1993, oh, wow, it's Harrison Ford as Richard Kimball in The Fugitive. It was a much bigger deal that it was Harrison Ford in an action movie as opposed to, oh, it's Richard Kimball. And right now, that's completely reversed. Frankly, to the detriment of the industry. Back when people showed up just for movie stars, that's why Hollywood was able to take chances with more original movies, or high concepts, or new-to-you adaptations. It wasn't that Hollywood stopped being original or audiences stopped caring about original concepts. It's that having Bruce Willis as an action hero in The Fifth Element was enough.
Right. And I always use the Vanilla Sky as an example. Like, Vanilla Sky would never get made if it wasn't for the fact that Tom Cruise's name, I mean, that whole advertisement was Tom Cruise. The movie didn't matter. And that's obviously not the case anymore. That's why Tom Cruise only makes Mission Impossible movies, right? Because
put up for American Made. He tried.
Yeah, which is actually a decent movie, American Made. You're right.
The studios do try to make these kind of movies, but nobody shows up.
Yeah. And I like Pierce Brosnan. I think, obviously he has the whole James Bond thing going for him, right? He's got, we all love him from that. I love this kind of, I think it's called a Van Dyke, this like crazy, like horseshoe mustache kind of thing. I hope he keeps it for Dr. Fate, because I think it would be really cool. And yeah, to Scott's point, I think casting Pierce Brosnan, casting James Bond as Dr. Fate brings a little bit more acknowledgement than if Pierce Brosnan was playing some character we didn't know, or if you got a lesser known actor to play Dr. Fate. Certainly the same with Helen Mirren, certainly if she's being set up as the villain of Fury of the Gods. And then Ron Livingston. Wendy, do you think that just came down to sort of, well, he kind of looks like Billy Crudup. He's a good actor. He's a decent actor. Let's get him. Like, what, where do you think that kind of came from?
I certainly think the resemblance played a part in the decision, for sure. Just because it's kind of, it was already established that he was going to be Barry's dad. So to have him now, he can't do it because of scheduling issues, and they have to find an actor. So yeah, I think appearance did play a part in it, but I also don't think that they would have just been like any actor. Oh, you kind of look like him from this, and we could picture you being Barry's dad. So go ahead and go. Like I know for a fact that they would have to go in chemistry reads and stuff like that, because that's a very intimate relationship that Barry's got with his dad. So an actor would need to portray that, and basically what had happened with mom and how that's going to play. So there's going to be some feels, some emotionals during his scene if that's the route that they go, if they show what happened.
For sure. And I also think it's interesting because we are talking about The Flash, right? And we know this is a Flash movie that's going to introduce the multiverse. We may or may not have two different Batmans. And so I'm curious if, it's going to be kind of written in, right? Like, does a Flashpoint type event happen? And then it would make total sense that your dad doesn't quite look like the dad you remember? Or are they just going to do a recasting where from the start, we just accept that he is the Billy Crudup character? Scott, you're nodding your head. Do you have an inkling of what direction they may go in with that?
I mean, it's a coin toss. It's whatever they choose to do, but both of them are fine. I mean, even people that saw Justice League, even people that saw the Zack Snyder Justice League, I imagine most of them could pick out either actor out of a lineup. And that's not a fault. They're just good workaday actors. And far too few people are almost famous. And I will always resent them for that. But no, Crudup was always one of those guys that everybody thought was about to become a star.
Yes.
He was a really good actor because he was often in critically well-liked pictures. But even 30 years ago, the films that he made were often not terribly commercial. And what I love about Brosnan is that he played Bond for 7 years, and then he spent the next 20 years basically playing grim, dark, more realistic versions of James Bond. Sort of either evil spies or realistic spies trying to be moral in a world gone to hell, and stuff like the November Man, the Taylor.
Yeah, November Man.
So he's getting to play the Bond that he always wanted to play, but that Eon wouldn't let him play after the fact.
It's funny, Scott. I think I told you this before when we were talking one time, but you mentioned that Billy Crudup is sort of one of those actors that for years and years and years, it was sort of say he's going to be the next big thing. And it's so funny you say it, because I remember moving to Hollywood 20 years ago and being told the three next big actors were going to be Billy Crudup, Jude Law, and Skeet Ulrich, if you remember those names.
Wow.
That those were the three in 1998. Those were the three actors that Hollywood thought were the next Tom Cruise, and certainly Jude Law and Billy Crudup have had great careers. Neither quite getting to Tom Cruise status. Maybe Jude Law a little close, but
you didn't realize he looked exactly like Johnny Depp even then. That's what
right.
Is that metacasting?
So true.
That was all made when Johnny Depp bowed out of the Fantastic Beasts film. It's like, ooh, Skeet Ulrich is waiting by the phone now.
Right.
Call him.
Well, I even thought Colin Farrell, they kind of made him to look a little bit like Johnny Depp in that first one. So, yeah.
Mads Mikkelsen will be fine. It was like, you could have just brought Colin Farrell back. I mean, nobody, again, regular audiences wouldn't have cared. I think, and this is something that is in itself a macro issue, which is that people on the internet, myself included, because it's the job, often debate, dissect, and form very strong opinions about things that the regular world couldn't care less about.
Well, that's all we do here, Scott. That's all we do on the Pop Council podcast.
But as long as we have the self-awareness,
right?
And that is fine. And what drives me nuts is sometimes, it's. And again, it's not just entertainment news. It's the whole cancel culture thing. 99% of the world doesn't care what Lola Bunny does or does not do in the next Space Jam movie. 99% of the world doesn't care that 6 Dr. Seuss books they haven't thought about in 20 years are going to be slightly harder to track down at the local library. But these things become overriding media narratives because we let them.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Speaking of things that we do enjoy and love, we, I think, have all been enjoying and loving Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And we had another great episode. In fact, I loved the second episode. I had said last week, I was a little disappointed with the first episode just because it was so much setup. I kind of wish Disney had dropped 1 and 2 at the same time and then put them out one at a time. But this week, really, I felt kind of picked up and got going. We saw the 2 characters in the same scene together. We know the plot. We're moving ahead. Couple interesting things to me I thought about this episode was we're sort of setting up Zero to be Hannibal Lecter, which I think is very cool. And also, obviously, we got to see a little bit more of the new Captain America. And I got to say, I didn't think he was as much of a dick this week. I think that they're sort of humanizing him a little bit. Obviously, we're going to see him and then this week, the introduction of Battlestar, who was the second Bucky in the comics and really the Bucky to U.S. Agent, the new Captain America. So we're really going to, I think, see those 4 characters start to go up against each other in the weeks to come. So let's start with you, Wendy. What were your thoughts on week 2, episode 2 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier?
I was so happy to finally see Sam and Bucky together. And of course, they right off the bat, it's not really starting on the best foot forward. Kind of Bucky is the accusatory. Why'd you give it up? It's like, I don't got time to talk about this. There's something else going on. And really, goes into what I really like about the pacing of these shows is that before, a more dramatic or like action heavy sequence, they'll give us a bit of comedy to kind of, and they did this with WandaVision too. Like WandaVision, if you remember, things will be light and funny and fluffy and fun until it really gets, and then it turns really dark and you're like, oh my God, what's happening? So it kind of is a similar way with this one. But I really sort of like the way that they opened the episode with John Walker and giving him a little bit more of that, like where you can maybe sympathize with him for a little bit, this is like the job that he's taken on. Now he's named the new Captain America. If I had a penny for every time they sell you, this is your new Captain America, I'm like, yeah, we get it. Yeah. Okay, he can throw the shield just like him. All right, but he's not Captain America. Like I hope we don't have to hear that phrase again in the 3rd episode because I'm just tired of it. But I do like that we got to see a little bit of his story, the people that he's connected with, in his personal life and with Battlestar, and sort of him. It's making it seem like he's extending the olive branch to Sam and Bucky, saying like, we can work together. But I get their hesitation. Like, first of all, like, you're not Steve. You're never going to be Steve. And no matter what you say, even though, and I think they're seeing through a little bit of that too, especially with the last line that he said to Sam is like, I got to have Cap's wingman. I'm like, nope. You didn't need to say that. You thought you were clever or you thought you had him. And then Sam's like, yeah, I knew it, man. I think Sam was a little bit more ready to be open
than
Bucky was. Bucky certainly was just like, no, I'm out. And I think Sam had a little bit of like, maybe we can work this together, trying to do what's right, as he said later on in the therapy session. And so I think by the time we get to the end, it's going to be interesting to see if they actually all four of them work together to take down the bigger bad, or if there's still going to be a bit of a conflict. So we will see about that. But it was really nice to see everybody fight together on the two semis.
Yes, that was an awesome sequence. Yeah, that was a really great sequence. It looked
practical too. Some of the scenes where they're jumping from one truck to the other, I was like, wow, that's scary, but great.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to add, and then we'll throw it to Scott, but we got the introduction of Elijah and Isaiah Bradley this week. Carl Lumbly, our guest last week, John Roca, guessed that correctly, that Carl Lumbly would be, in fact, playing
Isaiah Bradley, yeah.
Yeah, Isaiah. Thank you. I get Isaiah and Elijah confused sometimes. So, Scott, what did you sort of think about that storyline and kind of the direction that the series is going in?
Well, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the last week's episode as well. It was a lot of table setting. But I think they knew that, which is why they opened with that helicopter-to-helicopter action scene, which I thought was very clever in a Monsters, Inc. kind of way. This episode's action scene is well staged, but more conventional. We've seen lots of fights on trucks. As far as character work, it's doing a few things, assuming my predictions are correct. Whether it's misdirection or whether it's a testament that they're not going there, I thought it was very interesting. The first two people we meet alongside the other, what's the other Captain America's name?
John Walker.
John Walker.
His girlfriend / wife is apparently black, or at least a woman of color, and his best buddy is a black man. And I think there are presumptions, frankly, even more highlighted after diving into the, I don't remember the name of the comic book store, but it was the one that dealt with the African-American experiments in the Captain America program. That's where Carl Lumbly comes in. But the idea that you're going to be dealing with the racial implications of this manifest destiny Captain America type hero. And again, this is all in the text. This isn't, me finding what isn't there. They clearly want to play in that sandbox. Whether or not they're going to actually have the new Captain America be an outright racist, I don't know. I kind of hope so, just because I think in a skewed way, the show is trying to serve as an antidote for the last 20 years of blockbuster filmmaking, which has existed in this strange, fantastical bubble where race was only dealt with as a metaphor, and there was no sexism save for girls can play baseball just as well as boys.
Right.
You've seen, and this isn't remotely just Marvel at all, but you've seen a certain cultural homogenization of the worldwide friendly global blockbuster to the point where something like Will Smith's Wild Wild West comes off as terribly transgressive just because it has a villain who is A, racist, and B, the film acknowledges that racism is a cause of violence, which, back in the day was just studio filmmaking. We all knew it. We all, we had all lived through the, even the younger ones of us had lived through the O.J. Simpson trial. We weren't unaware of it, or the Rodney King situation. But, we've come to a point 20 years later where the, content found in Candyman Farewell to the Flesh is considered, aggressive or transgressive. I've always believed that had Hollywood not gotten obsessed with the 4-quadrant action fantasy tentpole like Pirates of the Caribbean, Spider-Man, Harry Potter, Shrek, and eventually the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we would have seen a lot more movies that were released as inclusive and or racially honest or sexually honest as In and Out, The Birdcage, Rush Hour, Anaconda, Waiting to Exhale, etc., etc. But I think we lost 20 years in terms of that's why one big reason why Hollywood feels so behind the curve compared to television, compared to theater, compared to streaming, because you had an industry that was dominated by sort of a first do no harm mentality. And by that, I mean, don't offend anyone. And that doesn't mean offending minority demographics. That means offending white people too, white dudes. And the other thing I hope that the show is going to deal with is sort of a meta commentary on the notion of recasting marquee characters. Captain America, who isn't Steve Rogers, isn't Captain America. It's just a guy in a suit.
Right.
And obviously that's something that we're very much dealing with right now. What is a Transformers movie if it isn't Michael Bay? What is a Spider-Man movie if it isn't Sam Raimi basically introducing the Spider-Man folklore to millions of people that only had, at best, cursory knowledge of the mythology? And obviously there are characters that have been successfully rebooted. Batman, James Bond. And that's
Why don't you stop at Batman and James Bond? No, but I know maybe Spider-Man to a degree.
Even Batman, you got 3 movies out of that.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting.
Not a blockbuster. Batman Begins was a well-reviewed movie that barely eked out a profit thanks to a robust DVD sales market. And it was only with The Dark Knight that was huge for a number of reasons that were kind of lightening, the zeitgeist. Heath Ledger dying in the way he did, playing the role the way he did, dying before the movie came out. So it was sort of this weird phantom, you didn't get to see, Heath Ledger making the talk show rounds as himself promoting the Joker. And you had the film existing as it did as sort of a towering portrait, metaphor for post 9/11 America in a way that, in a vacuum, it would have just been another superhero sequel. But the idea that, the next Batman reboot is going to be as big as The Dark Knight just because it's Batman, maybe. But
no, and I think the studio maybe learned that a little bit with their Supermans, right? Although they're going to try it again, so who knows? We've got a few minutes left, so I just want to jump to our last topic, which is the new series Invincible. It's an animated series on Amazon Prime Video, based on Robert Kirkman, best known, of course, as the author and creator of Walking Dead. I would actually argue that it's his second most famous comic book that he ever wrote. It was a long series that maybe lasted 50 to 100 issues. I think maybe 100 issues. Launched this past weekend on Friday on Amazon Prime. I had a chance to watch it and thought it was really, really great. Fantastic cast. I believe Seth Rogen is one of the producers and does a voice in it. J.K. Simmons does a voice. Sandra Oh, great cast. And I really enjoyed it. I watched the first 3 episodes. I had read the comic book, I think maybe the first sort of omnibus collection of the first, 12 issues. I read that years ago, and then I read a couple other along the run. So I sort of knew some of the twists and turns in at least the first arc, and was happy to see how they kind of made those come out in the series. And also interesting that it has sort of a different, each episode, at least the first 3, has sort of a coda at the beginning with the character, a father dealing with his son, and that's not from the comics. That's brand new. So I thought that was interesting that was John Hamm actually does the voice of that father.
Oh.
And so I thought it was an interesting sort of side story that I think that they attached to it to, kind of make a little bit more sense with the overall thing. So I really enjoyed it. Wendy, what did you think? You had a chance to see it, and I don't believe you had read the comic book, correct?
I had not, which I'm kind of in a way glad I didn't, and I should have taped my reaction or something like that for the last 10 minutes of episode 1, because I read the description, got the screener and everything, and read the description, and as I'm about maybe 15, 20 minutes into the first episode, I was like, this is nothing like what they're describing. This is very, young superhero in the world where superheroes saves, guard the earth, and coming of age, very heartwarming, mom, dad, they do this and that. I get the struggle of your dad's a superhero and all that stuff. And I was like, I don't understand. And then, the credits start rolling and then they come back in and I lost it because my husband had known about this, and he's like, this is supposed to be a little bit more, it's a bit brutal. And I was like, I'm not getting that. This is not brutal at all. And I ate my words as I'm watching this go down. And immediately I was like, I need to click on episode 2 and episode 3 immediately. I love the world that they've set. I love these characters and how they all kind of have, not only dealing with your normal superhero issues of saving the world and the possibility of, injury, death, whatever it may be, but also if you look at, Mark's story, being in high school and not getting his power, and then once he gets it, sort of what is the conflict there between him and his dad? Does he think his dad doesn't want him to have the powers? Does he want to have the powers? And also seeing the mom dealing with this, being, not a superhero. There's just a lot to unpack. I can't wait for episode 4. Like, I'm ready. I set my alarm. I'm like, all right, Friday, let's go.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It was interesting because, as you mentioned, there's sort of a big twist in the comic that comes, I think, maybe at the end of the 4th issue. And so I was sort of like, well, are they going to draw this out throughout the whole season? Or is this twist going to come in the beginning of, at the end of the 1st episode? And I'm glad that they got it out and done in the beginning, and then really sort of sets up the rest of the series. And, I think it comes down to, the animation's great. I love the R-rated aspect of it. All that's great. What it comes down to for me is the material, right? This was always a great story, which is why I really loved the comic book. So I think that the fact that they were able to really sort of adapt the story without changing too much is kind of maybe the secret sauce here. And as I was mentioning to both of you before, I sort of see it as being the Peter Parker story if Peter Parker's dad had been Superman. So, right. So instead of being bit by a spider, but it's the awkward teenager, who just develops superpowers. And then it's sort of, got a lot of, I would say more maybe commentary on DC and Marvel and the way superhero genres work. But Scott, what were your thoughts on the series? I understand you watched a couple episodes with your son.
Yes. Long story short, my 9-year-old walked in at the end of the 2nd episode. I was watching on my laptop. He expressed interest. So I am, whatever you call it now, a friend of mine who, Aaron Newworth, who's actually in this organization too, who had seen the screeners beforehand, is like, my son wants to watch this. I know you've seen them. Is there anything other than ridiculously graphic violence? He said no, so he watched it, enjoyed it, and now he's hooked. Knowing not that much about the show, or the book, other than it was allegedly very good, I kind of assumed there was some kind of twist coming with the dad, just because it's a streaming show, and they're not going to, go crazy on a very conventional comic book superhero story. There has to be some kind of edgy twist. And B, J.K. Simmons was playing with just enough of an edge to think, yeah, this guy does have issues. You can set him off. But what surprised me the most was that even after that scene, the show continued to be pretty wholesome. Yes, it's incredibly the alien invasion material and the superhero throwdowns. When people get, it's Mortal Kombat violence.
Yes.
Other than that, it's still a pretty wholesome show. You're dealing with conflicts with friends, arguments with parents, first crushes. I'm not going to say there's no profanity because I don't remember offhand, but it didn't strike me as profanity for the sake of profanity. It's basically a PG-rated superhero story with R-rated violence. It reminded me a lot of Brian Bendis's original Ultimate Spider-Man books.
Yes,
with a lot more beheadings. And yeah, it's very good so far in terms of what it sets out to do. I was sort of curious by the fact that most of the characters seem to treat an alien invasion with a triple-digit body count as just another day at the farm. Having not read the books, is that something that's imbued with a little bit more gravitas there? I don't know, and frankly, I don't care. It's not a deal breaker. But no, it's a fun, well-written, well-acted superhero show that so far is less of a deconstruction than just something that's slightly off the reservation.
Totally. And
something to Wendy's. The episodes, at least the first 3 episodes, they premiere on Amazon on Thursday night, so you might not have to set your alarm on Friday morning. I would suggest checking starting around 6 o'clock.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they did launch early. Yeah, they did launch early, I think, on Thursday.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got some feedback from my Coming to America review because I said it was premiering Thursday night. Like, can you change that? It's actually Friday morning. It's like, I'll change it, but come on.
But it's going to change back, right?
Blog post, Amazon releases it early on Thursday night. Like, It's not early. This is what they do.
Right. And just to give you a little insight into the comic book, I do think that is the tone of the book. It does take place in a comic book world, right? So the idea that there are superheroes flying around and an alien invasion, yeah, that is just another Tuesday in the Invincible world. So unfortunately, we are out of time, but what a great show. We got through all our topics. Yay. What a great show. I want to thank our audience for tuning in and remind you that we are just one of the shows the Hollywood Critics Association has been launching this year. So you want to make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video and tune in to Pop Council every Monday at 11 a.m. We also have our series Horrifically Horrifying on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. with Heather Wixson and Kevin Taft. What to Stream on Thursdays at 11 a.m. hosted by Morgan Rojas, and What's Trending in Hollywood on Fridays at 11 a.m. hosted by Scott Mendelson. I want to thank Wendy, as always, for joining us. Wendy, tell everyone where they can check you out.
Thanks, Jami and Scott. It was such a fun show today. I love that I got to talk all this geeky stuff with the both of you. You can find me everywhere on social media, Instagram, Twitter, just at my name, Wendy Lee. Nope, right here, Wendy Lee Szany, and on my YouTube channel, The Movie Couple.
Awesome. And round of applause for our special guest, Scott Mendelson. Yay! Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, where can people check you out?
Forbes.com. I apologize about the paywall, but if you're willing to make to spend the money, do it from one of my articles, because then I get paid a little bit.
Good to know.
For me, I get some of that money. My Twitter, which I should have included, I apologize for not doing so, at scottmendelson.com. I do have a Facebook page, but that's more for, like, you know, if you want family pictures and stuff. Which are not. Think of this.
Awesome. All right. And as always, I'm Jami Philbrick. You can check me out on Instagram and Twitter at Philbrick, and just my name on Facebook. I want to thank you all for joining us again. We'll see you next week on the Pop Council podcast. Good night, Ben.
Bye.